Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me for today's Wholesaler Toolkit session. As a quick reminder, the focus of the Wholesaler Toolkit is to dive a little bit deeper into the platform past the surface level. So focusing on some more advanced use cases outside of just charts and comparison reports that are really going to add value to your business, but it might not be obvious on how to master those certain use cases. My name is Kyle Gears, and I am a senior customer success manager for the institutional team here at YCharts. Thank you very much for joining me today. I think you're going to get quite a bit of value out of today's material. Want to note that questions can be sent using the Q&A or chat feature and will be answered throughout the demonstration. And we'll also have a recording that will be automatically sent via email as long as you're registered. We're also going to post the replay to our YouTube channel. Now, before we dive into the demonstration itself, just a quick reminder on the impact that YCharts has for asset managers and wholesalers, because I'm sure there's a few folks on the line that don't currently subscribe or have access. So ultimately, YCharts is going to help you shorten your sales cycle and improve conversations with clients and make for better engagements, especially in meeting. Now, there's a lot of other areas of the tool, such as ways to build intelligence, or as we're going to cover today, some portfolio tools that are going to help further those relationships. So there's a lot there, but like I said, in short, shortening the sales cycle and making for better conversations with clients is what we really try to focus on. Speaking of those relationships, I feel like portfolios are constantly coming up. So more of that portfolio approach instead of the hand-to-hand or fund-to-fund combat. That's what I hear more and more daily based on feedback from the 1,300 plus wholesalers that I work with. So today's walkthrough is going to focus just on that. You get an advisor's portfolio. Okay, well, what's next? How do I get it into YCharts? How do I upload it? Whether that's an email with holdings and weights, an Excel file, or a statement. Then how do I take that portfolio and analyze it? Where do I find holes in the portfolio, or where do I find opportunities for me to work with that advisor or expand the relationship, help them improve their portfolio or the client's portfolio? And then from there, how do we track that on an ongoing basis? How do I stay on top of those holdings, the portfolio as a whole, or even set alerts on the individual holdings within that model or within that portfolio? And once again, we'll answer any questions that you might have through the Q&A feature within Zoom. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into the platform and get moving on portfolio analysis. First and foremost, we're going to go to the tools dropdown, and you're going to see the portfolios option under the manage section. That's where we want to start. From here, you'll see a list of portfolios. You have some preloaded options. You'll see some blended benchmarks that you can leverage. Also, a standard model that you can test out. That's a default on your account called balanced ETF model. But what we really want to do is we want to create a new model here in the upper right-hand corner. Blank model portfolio is what you're going to want 95+% of the time. That's here's the model today, here are the holdings, here are the weights. We also have an option for dynamic models, which allow you to track changes to the holdings and or weights over time. So some more unique use cases fall under dynamic models, but the majority of the time you're going to want to focus on the blank model portfolio. So we'll go ahead and we'll click that. That's going to bring us into the editor. First and foremost, you're going to want to name that portfolio. And it's nice because you can actually type search for that model throughout the entire platform in the search box, in charts, as long as you have that labeled or named, something you can easily remember. A lot of times it might just be the advisor's name, the firm. So we'll just call this one Jane Doe Morgan Stanley. If you want to add a description, you can do that. whether it's an aggressive model, moderate model, taxable, tax-free. You can also add that in the name section as well. But description won't show up in all the major areas, but it'll give you a good reminder of what that model consists of or what the strategy is. Benchmark, you could choose any benchmark in the system, but we have those blended benchmarks. So if you search for a 60-40 or an 80-20, you'll see it under public portfolios and they're tagged or labeled benchmark. This is something that's universally shared in YCharts. Then you have the rebalance frequency. How often is the advisor rebalancing the portfolio? Monthly, quarterly, annually, or never, no rebalance. If you wanted to, you can add an advisory fee on the top. That's taken away from the returns. Most of the time, you can probably just skip past that if the focus is strictly on the model and the model performance. Next is the data input. Did the advisor provide you with weights? Did they provide you with share amounts, dollar amounts? Here's where you have the ability to choose the type. Next is start a series. This one is important, and you want to choose first common. That's going to give you the common inception date. If you choose earliest, it'll give you history all the way back to the oldest holding in the portfolio. But if certain holdings weren't around, it drops them out and re-weights the portfolio. So it sort of skews the data. You want to make sure that you're choosing first common. And if you ever forget exactly what these mean, you have the little question marks that you can click on for a full description or definition of what that actually is. The level is a custom value. That's how we begin calculating the performance of that model. You can choose any custom value you want. You can also view it almost like a dollar amount. And then the as of date is when you want to actually start calculating that level. So if you wanted to start calculating past the inception date for some reason, you can choose a specific start date. Next, we have the entry of the holdings and the weights. So as you come down here, you can start adding in tickers and weights. You can continue to click add item and it'll give you more rows, but it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. If you have a model or a portfolio that's smaller, 10, 20 holdings, it's easy to key punch them in with the holdings and the weights. However, if you're looking at a lengthier model, 30, 40 holdings, we also have an option for you to upload that data. So if you click upload data, we'll allow you to download a template. The template is very vanilla. It's simply going to give you a column for the ticker and a column for the weight, share amount, or dollar amount. You can copy paste directly into our template, save it down, upload it. Once again, very simple and straightforward. Ticker on the left, little blue box here has a drop down. You can choose whether you want weight, dollar, or share. Save it down, drop the file here, click on this box to view your browser, find the file and upload it, and then it'll auto upload for you. Once it's uploaded, once you have everything in there, simply click on update and save. Once that's done, the portfolio will begin to calculate. Now, just for the sake of time, I created a sample portfolio, but it only takes about 30 seconds to max 1 minute to generate the portfolio and calc all the data. So if you really needed to in meeting and you want to have an engaging conversation with the client where you're creating the model or you're swapping things out, you could definitely do that. My recommendation would be to have it prepared prior to the meeting, but worst comes to worst, you can do it in meeting because it's that quick. Now, once the portfolio is created, what does that look like? So if we click on the portfolio itself, that's going to bring me into the quote page, and it's going to show me everything from performance to allocation data, exposure data, key stats, which you can actually customize and choose what metrics are important to you and what you want to see. But you have things like asset allocation, top 10 holdings, and so on this quote page. If you want to dig a little bit deeper, you can click into the performance tab, which is strictly performance, shows your performance versus a benchmark over specific periods. The allocations tab is helpful. What does the portfolio breakdown look like? How much domestic exposure do they have versus international? Or how about market cap? Are we underweight anywhere that we should bulk up? Sector, credit quality, bond maturity, style and sector on the equity side. So it gives you a good aggregate overview of what the makeup of the portfolio looks like. Holdings, nothing too exciting there. It's just the holdings of that particular model and their weights. Also shows you drift since the last rebalance period. So, if you're drifting to the lower side or you see that negative number, it means there's been a little bit of underperformance there and the weights changed. On the positive side, the holding is outperformed and the weight is increased a little bit. Holdings overlaps interesting because we peel back the next layer of individual security exposure. So you can see here we have those individual securities, and within this portfolio, Microsoft is the largest holding at 1.36%. If I click this plus sign, it actually shows me what products hold Microsoft. So in this case, we have 3. If we go down the list and we look at Apple and expand that, there's actually only 1 fund in the portfolio that holds Apple. So we're seeing a lot of the same funds holding similar holdings or stocks. We can assume that there's a little bit of overlap there. Fundamental chart, as usual, you have the ability to look at unique periods, custom periods, or the standardized periods to see how that model has performed. Same with scatter plot, risk versus reward. Shows you individual holdings of that model as well as the model or portfolio as a whole. And then the stress test. I think this one has been a huge favorite as of late. It shows you how that portfolio has performed during periods of market stress or economic stress versus a bench. And you can even slot in a comparison security, which we'll get to when we make some changes to this portfolio. And then last but not least, if you just need a clean, concise overview of the portfolio, maybe you want to generate it prior to a meeting and have it in the meeting with you, or maybe you don't want to jump around between all these different tabs or pages and you want one page. If you go to the report section, the tear sheets are a phenomenal resource to capture quite a bit of data on a single page. So if you go to tear sheets, you'll see the 1-page report, click generate. That'll give you every key talking point or everything you need to know as it relates to that model. So performance versus the bench, exposure, allocation, fundamentals as far as distribution yield, dividend yield, top holdings, top 10 individual or underlying holdings. So quite a bit of data there that's extremely helpful if you need it for quick reference. So that's the first step or the first agenda item. How do we get the portfolio in there? And leading into that second bullet point, how do we begin to analyze it and identify opportunities? Now, we went through some of the basics, allocation, things of that nature, but what I really want to focus on is the holdings themselves. And the best way to do that is through the comp tables tool. So if you go to the tools drop down at the top of the page and then go into comp tables is essentially a data table tool. It's almost like having Excel in a website. And what we can do is we can pull in the individual holdings as well as any data point that we want to run some analysis. So I always say we look for the low-hanging fruit. What are the underperformers, or what are the more expensive holdings fee-wise in the portfolio? Those are a couple of things that we can do within this tool. Your first step, and we make it really easy on you, is go into this list option. And list allows you to pull in predetermined groups of holdings or products. If you go to list, you're going to want to look for my list. and then model portfolio holding. So once you have any portfolio loaded, you're going to be able to search for it here. You can either search for it via type search, or you can also expand my model portfolio holdings to find it, select it, and click submit. And in one shot, that pulls in every individual holding of the portfolio. Now from here, we can start pulling any data point that we want in. Now, the advisor might come to you and say, well, hey, I'm looking to limit my risk here. So I might pull in standard deviation, or maybe they want to extend duration or limit their duration exposure. All of those items can be brought in through the financial metrics section, and that can be one by one. So if I type in standard deviation, have a list of items here that I can choose from. For a quick tip, I always type in what I'm looking for and then the time frame that I want to see. It'll limit the list based on that time frame. So in this case, I'm looking for a 3-year standard deviation. Another quick tip, you always want the annualized version. So annualized standard deviation of monthly returns, 3-year look back, we'll pull that in. And we can see, hey, where is most of the volatility or risk or movement of these individual holdings within the portfolio. The other thing I mentioned, especially right now, hot topic of discussion is duration. We can pull in duration, and for those fixed income holdings, we can actually see what that looks like. So you can, off the cuff, pull in those individual data points on the spot. You can also go to the browse button and click through and choose multiple metrics. We have a popular metrics section, which houses the most widely used items: risk, returns, ranking category, yield, fees, expense ratio, manager tenure, so on. But one of my favorite exercises here, if I'm evaluating a portfolio, is to use one of our metric sets. And the metric sets ultimately allow you to pull pre-built data sets quickly, easily, and efficiently. So if I click on the metric set dropdown, I go to open metric sets, there's a wide range of options here: risk, returns, exposure. But my favorite one is I'm starting to evaluate a portfolio. There's going to be ranks and category. Ranks and category is going to pull the category ranks for those products. And what it does is it's going to help you easily identify who the underperformers are. So if I'm looking for the low-hanging fruit, I'm trying to lock in on those higher category ranks. And if I have a product in that category, that's a great opportunity for me. So as you can see, there's a full list of metrics here. We have a couple bonus metrics in there with the expense ratio ranking category. So the lower the number on the performance side, the better the performance versus a category. The higher the number, the worse the performance. Similar with the expense ratio. Lower number on the expense ratio, meaning it's less expensive than the majority of the category. Now, since we've pulled this in, we have all the symbols here, we have the names, we could probably identify what these funds do, but if I'm not familiar with them, what I would normally do is pull in an info column, and this is qualitative data. So I go to the info column section, I'm going to go to fund info and simply pull in the category name. So that's going to help you easily identify what category that's in and figure out, hey, do I have a product here? Is this something that I compete with, or is it something I can easily replace? Do I have something similar? So we have that category name in, and I usually drag and drop it over to the left-hand side. And simple as that, I can now understand where these funds participate. Then you go through and you sort these columns and figure out and kind of eyeball the data. Hey, is there anything that's really been lagging? And what jumps out at me is this last one on the list here, this Federated Strategic Value Dividend, which is in the large value category. It's also 76% more expensive than the rest of its peers. So that looks like a good replacement opportunity if I have a large value fund and the advisor wants to keep that large value allocation. So what's next? Well, let's go back to the original model now that I've identified a replacement opportunity, and let's figure out what my fund would look like replacing that current holding. So what I'll do is I'll go back to my tools dropdown and portfolios, because once again, we make it really easy on you. You don't have to input a completely new model with that swap. What you want to do is you want to find the original. Here we have it, Jane Doe, Morgan Stanley. I'm going to click on the more options drop down or button, I should say, and then duplicate that model. So we take a copy of the current model as is. So all you need to do is come in and edit items. So we find that large value product, federated strategic value, and we'll go ahead and replace it. So, let's say a Vanguard wholesaler, and I have a large value fund in Vanguard Windsor that I want to see what the impact would be if I replaced it with that. So we'll go ahead and we'll slot that in. You can also get creative with the name just so you know what's what as you're searching. So we'll call this proposed with BWNAX. We'll update it. We'll save it down. You might get a pop-up related to the SEC marketing rule, more so for advisors, noting that there's not a fee here. But since this isn't going to end up in the hands of the client, you can save anyway and surpass that. This is more so for one-on-one use with the advisor. And as you can see, it starts to calculate. Should only take about 30 seconds to a minute, sometimes a lot less, as you just saw. Now we have that model in there. How do we compare the two? That's the next step. So if you click into the proposed model, and I always recommend starting with that proposed model because ultimately we're going to run a report on it and we want that to be slotted in to the first spot in the report. Now we come in, we're on the quote page. You can see how it does versus the bench. You see all the same data that we discussed earlier. One helpful area might be the performance page because you can actually edit comps here in the upper right-hand corner, and we can slot in the original model, which was just called Jane Doe Morgan Stanley. And that's the nice thing about the type search is you can type search based on the advisor's name or the firm name, find it pretty easily, choose it, click update. And that'll populate now with the original model. So the original is in blue, our proposed is in purple. We can click through different time frames to see how we stack up. And then you also have the periodic returns down here in bar chart format, annual returns, and so on. The other option, and I think this is the catch-all, this is going to be the most efficient way to do this when it comes to the proposed versus the current, is the report feature. So if you click on the reports button, a couple different report types. If you're going one versus one, the comparison report is going to be your go-to. If you're doing a one versus many, the multi-comp. So if you have a couple different model options or proposals, 3 or more, the multi-comp is going to be what you want to focus on. But for now, it's just one versus one in the example that I'm using. So I'm going to use the comparison report, and the comprehensive is going to be your best option. You can either run it with a benchmark or without, depending on whether you want to focus just on the model changes or you want the bench included. So I just want to focus on the change. I'm going to go with no benchmark, but the comprehensive includes every single potential piece of data that you could want. Everything from performance to risk, allocation, exposure, and fundamentals. Side-by-side comprehensive report. We'll click that and choose start. It automatically accounts for Jane Doe Morgan Stanley proposed. So we're going to find that original model once again. Choose it, click next. You can input a cover page with data. You can fill that in if you'd like, or just put something in the field so you can run the report, just the fields that the asterisks require you to. Once that's in there, you click generate. And ultimately that kicks out the side-by-side comparison report. So as I mentioned, everything from performance, we can see we've improved performance here. We've also actually decreased the aggregate fee across the portfolio with that change. Calendar year returns, asset allocation breakdown, all your exposure, you even have individual country exposure, market cap, style, we can see the changes there. So everything you'd expect. Once again, I made a small, slight change in a 9% allocation, but it's turned out to have improved the portfolio. Once we get down here to risk info, we can see we've increased the Sharpe ratio, for example, as well as the Sortino. Yeah, we might be taking on a little bit more risk in terms of standard deviation and max drawdown, but we've increased the upside. So risk-adjusted returns have improved. So pretty lengthy report, so I don't want to go through everything in detail, but fundamentals, holdings data, individual holdings is all there for you. So those are going to be the ways to understand the breakdown of the portfolio, make a change, identify the opportunity, make the change, and then present that proposal and then the positive impact that your product might have on that portfolio. So that was bullet point number 2 on the agenda. Last but not least, I also want to walk through tracking client portfolios. And the best way to do that, once they're uploaded, you have them in the database. And it's a beautiful thing because you can proactively track them and reach out to clients and say, hey, there's a manager change on this fund, or this fund has outflows or has had poor performance. So you can monitor those holdings or those portfolios and have a good excuse to engage with a client. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to the dashboard just by clicking on the YCharts logo. Always brings you home to the dashboard. I'm actually going to take advantage of one of my dashboard tabs. So from here, I'm going to go to Manage in the upper right-hand corner, and I'm going to create a completely new tab that's dedicated to my client models. So I'll go to New Dashboard. You can call it whatever you want, but I'll just call it Client Portfolios. And select Create. You can have up to 8 tabs. You can build out your own. We also have some great templates in this Manage section that we created here at YCharts. A couple clicks to add those. Ultimately, you can have 8. You can use anything that you want on these dashboards. Client portfolios, blank slate. How do I track or keep tabs on my client's portfolio? First, we're going to add a module. And I'm going to look at the security list section. And I'm going to choose New Watch List. Now, if you have multiple client models, let's say they're your, top clients. These are the clients that do the most business with me, or they're my largest clients AUM-wise, or I have the best opportunities with. You can add multiple portfolios. So if we add in Jane Doe, we'll go with that original model. We'll add that portfolio in, and this is the portfolio level, but you can add multiple portfolios within one watch list. So if I had a John Doe in there, I can add that in. But since I only created one, we'll run with that for this example. Once the watch list is on there, we can kind of stretch it out. The overview gives you the one-day change in the model. The data tab allows you to see how is that portfolio doing over certain periods. What's the dividend yield? What are some risk metrics? You can also come in to this drop down here by clicking the 3 dots and edit the data columns and choose what you want to see. So if I wanted to add year-to-date returns, I can add that in there, choose the order which I want to see it in. Or I can add an info column, and the big item here is security name. That's really the only info column that I always recommend or use, just to see the portfolio name, because we have an identifier there, P colon with a bunch of numbers, hard to identify what's what. So the security name is important. But then you can click apply and customize all of that data to see those figures. On the other side of things, if I go to add module again, a little bit of a different approach here. This time I go to the browse button rather than new watch list. Very similar to what we did in the comp tables tool. I'm going to go to my list, model portfolio holdings, my models, or just search for Jane Doe Morgan Stanley, choose that and click submit. And here's the big difference. On the left-hand side, when I created that new watch list and added the portfolio, it's the portfolio itself. Here, it's strictly the holdings. So what I can do is I can keep tabs on those individual holdings and get an idea of, hey, what's underperforming, or I can add duration in on the fixed income side of things, or look at fund flow data. I can even set alerts here. So if I go to this drop down again, I can set alerts on the entire watch list. So a lot of really interesting things that you can do within this monitoring standpoint, portfolio as a whole, individual holdings, and it just does a great job of staying on top of this, being proactive, and giving you some good reason to engage with or reach out to clients as it relates to their portfolio. Know we're about a minute over, but I want to thank everybody for sticking with me. I know this was more of a longer wholesaler toolkit session, but really hoping that there's some positive takeaways that can be implemented in your business and help you win some assets. Also wanted to highlight the fact that if you have any questions, please reach out to us, reach out to your dedicated support rep, whether that's me or one of my colleagues. We're always happy to help, whether that's hopping on a call, sending a quick video on how to accomplish something or do something. We're here to help as partners. But once again, thank you for joining me today. Hope you got a lot out of this session and you can put it to good use. Have a great rest of the week and weekend, and we'll see you on the next Wholesaler Toolkit session.